Right, we've got one more of these guideposts to look at, and then we have journeyed through Brene Brown's guideposts to wholehearted living. If you're looking through your sheet, you should be able to work out which is the one that we've not done. And it is number 4, imaginary Kit Kat for you. Cultivate gratitude and joy, let go of scarcity and the fear of the dark. Don't you love some of the ways in which these have been written? Let's remind ourselves that these are the results of research, and the thousands of people who have been signalled to Brene as people who live happy and fulfilled and satisfied and wholehearted lives. So this is the product of research, and I just am fascinated that they are such biblical concepts. So let's start with this idea of gratitude and joy. Brene Brown said, "I've never interviewed a single person who talks about the capacity to really experience and soften into joy who does not actively practice gratitude." It's the last two words that we need to be mindful of. Practice gratitude. As she points out, you can get all your yoga gear on and you can have your yoga DVD and you can have your yoga mat, but if you sit and have a cup of tea and don't do any yoga, you don't practice yoga. And so practicing gratitude is not just a belief, it's not just an idea, it has to in fact be a practice. And that's an interesting challenge for us to say, where are the practices of gratitude in our lives? When do we actually take the time to be mindful of what it is that we are in fact grateful for and to do something about it? So Brene Brown suggests that the equation might work like this: practice plus thankfulness equals gratitude, and gratitude plus joy equals satisfaction. That it seems that gratitude and joy are intrinsically linked. It's not surprising. People who are ungrateful, well, we don't really think of them as being very joyful, do we? You can't imagine someone who's ungrateful being ungrateful with a smile on their face. I really hate this. No, that's weird. We know that gratitude and joy, they go together. But the question really is today, is there a practice of gratitude in your life? And what is it? One of the things I've discovered in working with clients over the last couple of years is that I will, not with everyone, but periodically, to help someone begin to acknowledge what really is good and true about their life, ask them to start keeping a gratitude journal. And I ask them each day to write down 3 things that they're grateful for, to develop this practice of gratitude. And you know what I've noticed? Every single person who does that reports that after a few weeks they feel more joyful than ever before. Because you see, some of us have a capacity to acknowledge what isn't rather than what is. I remember talking to one young lady, and this was her kind of story about life. Only bad things ever happen to me. That was her story about life. And she was telling me how she had recently got a job, but instead of focusing on that, she said, but they were late in paying me. See, I told you, only bad things ever happen to me. I said, aren't we talking about a job that you got? Oh, yeah. It was as if her mind couldn't even see that she had something to be grateful for. Instead, her mind could only focus on the thing that wasn't as she had hoped. So she had this capacity to filter out good things and focus only on bad things. That capacity, Brene Brown might call scarcity thinking. It's this notion that somehow there just isn't enough to go around, that there just isn't enough goodness, that somehow I will miss out on the good things, that other people will get them, or if I do get them, they won't last very long. It won't be long before they run out, and then I'll be back to having nothing. And we see this mindset all the time in life, like people who accomplish their weight loss goal only a week later to set a new one, and they're not satisfied at all. Or reading your Facebook updates and feeling like your life pales into comparison with other people's. You ever had that phenomenon? You're reading Facebook and you're thinking, oh, they're doing something exciting, and I'm doing something exciting. I was struggling watching Alistair's photos from Israel recently because I really wanted to go to Israel again, and I had to remind myself that I could go again one day. It didn't mean nothing good was happening to me. Actually, here's a tip. If you do want to feel better about yourself, try reading your Trade Me feedback. That usually works for me. I usually feel a lot better after reading my Trade Me feedback. Triple A. That's me. Anyway. It's not feeling adequate enough before you even get out of bed in the morning. Lynn Twist wrote a book called The Soul of Money, and she said this: for many, our first waking thought is, I didn't get enough sleep. And the next one is, I don't have enough time. And by the time we go to bed at night, our minds race with a litany of what we didn't get or didn't get done that day. So that's what happens if you don't practice gratitude. It's like a filter comes over your mind. And instead of acknowledging good things, and instead of celebrating good things, all you can think about is bad stuff. All you can think about is where it's fallen short, where it didn't meet your expectations. And what a challenge that is, this scarcity thinking. And Brene Brown, I'm glad that she doesn't practice sort of positivity thinking, because she doesn't say, well, you know, the opposite of scarcity is some sort of abundance talk, some kind of prosperity talk, but simply to acknowledge that what I have is enough. That I am enough, that my kids are enough, that I don't actually need more. So the difficulty is, for many of us, we use the outside to regulate the inside. It's very tempting, isn't it, to use things that are happening in our life to determine our mood. And I struggled with this in the last day, because yesterday I was struggling not to enjoy the fact that they had to open up a partition and fill the whole space with people that they hadn't even banked on. I keep reminding myself of a little quote: don't let criticism get to your heart, and don't let praise get to your head. I thought, don't read too much into this. It's nice that this is happening, but don't read too much into this. But, you know, in truth, it set me up for a little bit of disappointment when today our gathering is not as big as it might normally be. And so I have to be careful. Am I going to let my inside be governed by the outside? Am I going to let my mood be determined by what other people decide to do or don't do? Because if I do, then my sense of well-being is going to go up and down like a yo-yo, isn't it? I'm going to be constantly wondering, am I going to be okay today? Will today be okay? Because I'm using the outside to regulate the inside. I can't help but think of the Apostle Paul, that godliness with contentment is great gain. Did you hear that? Godliness with contentment is great gain. The other thing we're supposed to let go of is the fear of the dark. Actually, I think this is a first. The rock band Iron Maiden has been quoted in a sermon. I just couldn't resist in the end. Maybe the rock jock in me dies hard. This is a lyric from a Iron Maiden song. Fear of the dark, fear of the dark. I have constant fear that something's always near. Fear of the dark, fear of the dark. I have a phobia that someone's always there. I actually had as a child, I had an experience that filled me with a real legitimate fear of the dark. I must have been about 8, and we had a hallway that ran down the back of the property, back of the house, and there was a big window that looked out onto the backyard. Now, I'm sure it was probably my face on reflection, but at the time, as a kid, and the toilet was at the end of this hallway, so you had to walk down this hallway. I remember walking down the hallway late one night, and I looked out the window and I could see a face. I was convinced I could see a man staring back at me. Oh, hackles on the back of the neck go up just thinking about it. Pretty sure it was probably my face on reflection, but at that moment, that fear of the dark, that's real. And Brene Brown put it like this: fear of the dark is a bit like this kind of thinking. That you're busy, you're standing over your child as they go to sleep, and you're acknowledging how beautiful they are, and they're just gorgeous when they sleep. That's when they're at their best, kids. and they're finally sleeping. And then this thought grips you. But what if something bad happens? What if they had an accident at school tomorrow? What if they got sick and they got leukemia? Fear of the dark is that capacity to, even in a good moment, let fear come and grip your heart. Fear that's not connected to anything that's happening. Fear that's connected only to imagining. Brené Brown puts it like this, that to practice being afraid of the dark is to rehearse for tragedy. But the problem is there is no tragedy. So what a terrible thing it is to do, to be standing there looking at your beloved child, but instead be thinking about terrible things that could one day happen to them, none of which have actually ever happened, by the way. The only place they ever happened was in here. Brené Brown says, the dark does not destroy the light, it defines it. It's our fear of the dark that casts our joy into the shadows. It can spoil things. It's hard to be joyful when we're cultivating these fears and apprehensions about what might happen one day. So we have to let go of that. See, being grateful is about training my mind and my heart to observe what is rather than what isn't. Because you see, it's an endless list, isn't it? The things that aren't, the things that I couldn't have. It's like, well, oh, good, I've finally got a little bit of money in the bank account. That's good. Oh, yeah, but I'm still fat. Ah, that's bad. You see, the thing that isn't is always present. I can always find another thing to be disappointed about. Brené Brown says, if we think we can beat vulnerability to the punch by imagining loss, this is the thing. We think if we can beat vulnerability to the punch by imagining loss, we will suffer less, but we're wrong. You see, a lot of us feel like we've got this radar for bad stuff. This radar that's sort of preparing us for bad stuff. We imagine scenarios playing through our head. You ever do that? Let yourself imagine scenarios. But you don't have to be prepared for scenarios. Because scenarios aren't what happens. Life is what happens. You have to know that when life happens, you'll be able to cope. But many of us, we play out the scenario in our head as a way of preparing ourselves. A friend of mine said he once heard a preacher say that 9 out of 10 things that you worry about don't happen, which is proof that worry works. No, it's not proof that worry works. It's proof that 9 out of things that you worry about, 10 things don't actually ever happen. So worry is wasted energy. And the Bible makes this connection between gratitude and joy. Listen to the words of Paul the Apostle. Be joyful always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you. And so often in the Christian life, and people ask me all the time, I'm just trying to work out what's God's will for my life. Here it is. Be joyful. Pray continually. Give thanks. This is God's will for your life. Be someone who's trained yourself to focus on what is and to find that that's enough